Hi everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about managing mental health throughout your PhD. So I can't think of a single person who didn't struggle with anxiety, depression, or burnout throughout their PhDs, including me. I struggled from burnout a few times, and unfortunately, it took me quite a few years to find ways to cope with it to prevent any future burnout. So I want to share these tips with you today about how to manage them. And if you're thinking of doing a PhD in the future, or maybe you're doing a PhD right now, but you know what I'm talking about. But the whole point of this video is to give you a few really good tips that work, that are going to help you to manage mental health throughout your PhD. If you are new to the channel, I am Matt. I'm talking about academia and transition to industry because I'm an ex-academic, used to be a postdoc and a supervisor in British universities, and then I moved to industry, to medical writing. So I talk about anything that is academia and industry related. So please consider subscribing and let's go back to the topic. First of all, if you are already struggling with mental health and it's affecting your day-to-day life and it's been going on like this for quite some time, you probably shouldn't be watching this video. You should be picking up your phone and seeking professional support. Counselors and physicians can provide invaluable help, and it's not a sign of weakness to get in touch with them. It's actually a sign of strength and wisdom, because first of all, you're smart enough to recognize that you have a problem, that you need help, and then to find these people and be brave enough to talk openly about this. So definitely reach out to anyone if you need help. And you know what? I know quite a few people who did reach out to counselors during the PhDs or after, and that's absolutely fine. And it's also worth checking what mental health support your university has, because these days they usually do have counselors that you can reach out to and you can get some help for free. So it's definitely worth talking to them, even if you're in the early stages of feeling, a little bit anxious, depressed, or fatigued from your PhD. Then it's just worth talking to them, opening this conversation, and see what kind of support they and your university can provide. Right, besides that, there are quite a few things that you can do inside work and outside of work to make sure that you don't experience burnout and to manage your mental health. So let's start with aspects that are to do with work itself. So first of all, you need to learn how to manage your expectations and your supervisor's expectations, right? Because, I like to think about supervisors as excitable puppies or children, and they want to do all of experiments, and by this I mean they want you to do all of experiments as quickly as possible, and by this I mean they want to see all of the data by the end of the week. And this is just enormous pressure, and I actually released a video about this, and I'm going to link it up in the description down below and here or here, I'm not sure. So I talk about this in this video for a good 10-15 minutes, so I talk about managing expectations in much more detail. But the whole idea is that to be aware that your supervisor will want to do all of the experiments because they're detached from the lab. They forgot how much time it takes to do experiments, to optimize them, to process the data, and so on. So, what is really important here is that you create a priority list of experiments and you sit down with your supervisor and you make sure that you only do experiments that are the most important. And you can create this 20/80 list, by which I mean the 20% of your work will generate 80% of the results. So which are the key 20% of experiments that are going to generate the 80% of your overall data? So this is how you can manage the expectations with your supervisor, by creating the priority list and sticking only to the experiments that are absolutely key. And in this way, you will not be overwhelmed by the number of experiments that you need to do. And when you have a list, anytime you go to your supervisor, for your, one-on-one weekly meeting or whatever, then they will probably suggest another experiment, but you will pull out your list and you will say, okay, these are experiments I'm going to do in the coming weeks. These top 5 are the most important ones. If you want me to do this new shiny experiment right now, then I need to remove something from the priority list, and there's no problem. However, if this is what you do, then your supervisor will probably think about it twice And most likely, at least in my experience, they will say, no, fine, don't do this additional experiment, just focus on what you really need to do for this paper. Because in the end of the day, they want to publish a paper with you, and they don't want to do, 1 million other experiments on the side, regardless of how exciting they are. The paper is the priority. And then as you're doing your experiments, you need to learn to celebrate small wins. That's actually really, really important, because even for very successful academics that publish a lot of papers in high impact journals, they still fail. The experiments still don't work. So throughout my academic career, I had to learn to just appreciate the fact that I can execute experiments very well. Whether they give me any answers, whether, I get the data that takes me somewhere, that is a completely different question. And it doesn't always work. Essentially, you just need to change the course of your experiments, ask different questions, take your science somewhere else. But the fact that you've done experiments well, this is yours. This is a skill you have. And I had to learn to appreciate the small wins. Oh, I've just done an experiment. I've got really nice data. It doesn't take me anywhere, but technically this data is rock solid. So just appreciating the little wins. Right. So the next part here is about managing your time. So if you can manage your time well, then you will reduce stress and you will improve your mental health and prevent future burnout. So again, I released a video on time management and I'm going to link it down below. And I know quite a lot about time management because, I had a very tense time in academia. I was very lucky and I ended up publishing 3 papers in Nature Publishing Group within 5 years. So it was very intense. It was a lot of experiments. But the way I could be so successful and also at the same time, manage my mental health was by chunking experiments together. So I was doing all of the key experiments that were similar to each other together so that I didn't have to think about 5 things at the same time. I was just thinking essentially about one technique. And then I was just doing 5 different experiments while we were all following the same technique. So this made my life much easier and I experienced much less mental fatigue in this way as compared to when I was doing 5 completely different experiments at the same time. This was much more stressful for me. Also, it's this idea that actually you can't work at 100% efficiency. That's so important. And when I started my PhD, I was like, okay, this experiment is going to take me 2 days because as per protocol it is supposed to take 2 days and that's it. But then I realized that actually I can't work at 100% efficiency. It's impossible. At some point I will need to take a break. I will need to eat. Someone will come to me, ask me questions, and I will spend time helping someone else. So I realized based on my own experience is that the maximum efficiency I can work at is 70%, which means that whatever you're doing you need to add 30% of extra time. Again, this feeds back to managing expectations. So now, whatever you're going to do when your supervisor is asking you, hey, how much time is going to take you to do this experiment? You'll be like in your head, okay, it's going to take me 10 days, but I'll add, 30% on top. So 13 days. This is how much time it's going to take me. So, hopefully you will finish the experiment in 10, 11 days, but you will have that extra buffer which will make you feel safer in your head, right? And at the same time, if you do manage to deliver the experiment sooner, then your supervisor will be happier. So there is a win-win. So hopefully by organizing your time well and managing the expectations you have and your supervisor has, this will really help to alleviate any stress and your mental health will be so much better and you will be less likely to experience burnout in the future. So definitely watch these videos and use the tips from these videos in your day-to-day life. And this is what you can definitely do at work. And then another thing that you can do at work is to talk to your advisors. So when I was a PhD student, I had 2 advisors, but it was only one of them that was so crucial to mentoring me, to giving me life advice, to helping me with experiments and, time management, but also just helping me with my mental health and telling me what I can expect, what I shouldn't expect, and what it's like to be an academic. So definitely talk to your advisors, especially if you have any problems with doing research or you're struggling with your supervisors. Talk to the advisors. They might be really helpful and they might give you some great pieces of advice. And remember, they are on the inside. They know these people, they know your research. so they can give you a very specific tailored advice. And as you are doing all of this, learn to say no. And this is something that is so important inside your work environment and outside of your work environment. And one way to say no to your supervisor can be indirect by having a priority list. And when they ask you to do experiments, you just show your priority list and you say, okay, these are the key experiments for now. If you want me to do this new experiment, fine, but we have to swap something. I can't do everything at once. I just don't have enough time and energy. So this is how you learn how to say no, by giving people evidence but you just physically don't have time to do things. Also, before you say yes to anyone, always check your calendar. Check how much time you actually have. And schedule in your calendar time for yourself. Schedule breaks. Schedule time to not do any experiments. And this is a really nice segue to start talking about how you should manage your mental health by doing various things outside of work. I was absolutely obsessed about my research. I think the word obsessed is absolutely key. But I noticed about myself that if I worked really long hours every day, then my efficiency used to drop because I was exhausted. I couldn't think clearly anymore. I would miss things. I would make small mistakes. I wouldn't ask interesting questions anymore, right? So I realized that I really need to rest. And at some point, which was still sort of early in my academic journey, I used to come to work on Saturdays. And what really got me out of the lab on Saturdays on time was the fact that I had a hobby, which I still do. I still do have it. So I done salsa. And it happened when on Saturdays at 4 p.m., I used to help with running some salsa classes. So I had to get out of the lab to run to salsa, to dance, to help, teachers with the classes and maybe perhaps teach people how to dance myself as well. And this was absolutely great because, it got me out of that environment. I had to finish, I had to go out. And then, I met people, I did something completely different, which was creative. It was a really nice way to forget about doing research and do something that made me feel good. So then, over the years, throughout my, academic years, dancing definitely got me out of doing research, late evenings or weekends. But also, I remember just, for example, going to gym and signing up for classes or anything like this, doing any sport or meeting friends on purpose at 5 o'clock or 5:30, so that I had to leave the lab to be there to fulfill my commitments, at 5 o'clock, at 5:30, right? So I couldn't stay any longer. And this was great for my mental health. So definitely schedule your days so that if you struggle to leave the lab because you like doing research so much, or you're just so ambitious like I was, make yourself leave the lab. And over time, you will see that actually not spending, 60 hours in the lab every week is actually going to improve your efficiency and you'll end up doing much better research. So I spoke a little bit about hobbies right now. Like for me, it was dancing and gym and actually playing volleyball as well. And this also feeds back into physical health. And what is so beautiful about physical health is that, it releases all over happy hormones. So definitely, if you're not active, consider even doing yoga every day, right? Just having a little bit of movement, stretching out, and doing something for your body that will release happy hormones. And in the long run, this is definitely going to help with managing your mental health. Also, mindfulness is great and meditation. Now, you may not be a great fan of meditation, and I know quite a few people who are not. But if you don't want to meditate, you can do other things which have very similar effect as meditation. So if you put your hands on your chest, then you will stimulate the vagus nerve, which is underneath your lungs. And the vagus nerve will induce parasympathetic nervous system, which is essentially our natural chill pill. So you will automatically just relax by having that extra weight on your chest. And this is what meditation does essentially by slowly breathing in and out because it just induces pressure from your lungs on the vagus nerve. So definitely consider the power of physical exercise, the power of vagus nerve rather than, meditation. And just, meeting people, socializing and having that time for yourself. Because I'm telling you, I can tell you again and again, actually having that time off is going to improve your time in the lab. Absolutely, 100%. And then finally, what really helped me with managing my mental health in the long run when I was in the lab was having a plan B. Because I found it very stressful that I would have to stay in the lab for the rest of my life, climb the academic ladder. Because over the years I realized, how difficult it is and how lucky you need to be to get there to secure a lectureship or a fellowship to become a permanent member of staff at the university. It is incredibly hard. So over the years, I learned first of all that I enjoy doing science. So it was worth just enjoying the fact that I could do the job well and just enjoy the small wins the day to day. But in the long run, obviously, I I wasn't sure whether I would be able to secure a permanent position, and I don't think anyone can be because academia is just so competitive. And you need to be incredibly lucky as well to secure, long-term funding. So definitely think of having a plan B. And leaving academia when you are in academia is really difficult because academia is basically like a cult. Everyone around you stayed, all of the professors stayed, in academia for decades. This is all they know, they love it, and obviously they don't want to say that you should go somewhere else because they don't also want to admit that something else could be better than what they're doing because they sacrificed their lives to academia. So there is definitely a lot of stigma about leaving, but actually there's nothing wrong about leaving academia, and they don't know much about what it's like out there in the industry. They don't have first-hand experience in most of the cases, but you definitely should. So consider having a plan B, consider leaving. You can always come back if you want to. I know of quite a lot of people who left academia for industry and then came back and then went back to industry again. So it is definitely possible for you to go back and forth if you want to find, something for you that is right. But for now, you definitely need to have a plan B because then even if you feel like your PhD is not going anywhere, you're not getting, lots of good data, it's way too stressful. The moment you realize PhD is not everything and you can just go outside, work, for a company somewhere else, doing something a bit different, then you might enjoy doing research again, might enjoy doing science again, and it will be absolutely fine. So definitely have plan B. Having said that, I hope you're going to find this useful and you're going to take these tips to manage your mental health throughout your PhD. And I can tell you right now that I haven't used these tips during my PhD, but then when I was postdocing, this is essentially what I used to do. I used to have lots of mindful breaks. I used to celebrate small wins. Actually, throughout the day when I was a PhD during winter, I used to take 1 hour sun break. So, I'm in the UK, it used to get dark really, really quickly. It gets dark really, really quickly in winter. So I used to take a 1 hour sun break in the middle of the day, but I would just leave the lab and go for a walk for 1 hour at lunchtime to just see the sun, see the sky, mostly cloudy because I'm in the UK. But regardless, just being outside, and that really helped my mental health. And besides that, managing time, managing the expectations, having hobbies and things that drag you out of the lab were so key. I did all of them, and I ended up having a really, really good mental health throughout my postdoc years. So do consider, following any of these tips, and I'll see you in the next video.